Data centers are at the core of the internet infrastructure driving the world's modern digital economy. On this exciting episode of TCS Plus, TechCentral is on site at the Africa Data Centers JHB2 facility in Samrand. This facility, when it was built, was one of the largest on the continent, but today it is undergoing further expansion. And to tell us more about that, I have Dr. Angus Hay, Regional Executive for South Africa, speaking to us today. Dr. Hay, welcome to TCS.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hay, as mentioned, this facility was one of the largest on the continent when it was built, but it is being expanded. Why is that?
So we acquired this facility some years back. It's been known in the industry for some time as one of the flagship facilities on the continent, as you mentioned, and also one of the largest. We've moved into an era where we've moved away from private data centers, which the Samrand facility used to be, into colocation data centers. And we're one of the largest providers of colocation data centers across the African continent. And so what we are converting the Samrand facility into is from a highly secure environment which provided a secure, highly available environment for a single customer into a colocation facility which provides for multiple customers. And more importantly, we're scaling it up into what we call a hyperscale facility. And hyperscale is what houses what we recognize today as the global cloud.
Yes. Now, building this facility larger means that you are going to have to use more resources to run the facility. And we do know that we have power challenges in the country. So how do you ensure that this facility can run despite power outages?
So one of the key elements about when running data centers, and it should be obvious, is that when customers are moving into data center, and we're talking about major customers, we're talking about your hyperscale cloud providers, we're talking about major financial institutions, and in Samrand's case, that's literally the case, as well as any multinational enterprises that are looking for colocation. The things they're looking for, if you think about why you would really move into colocation, firstly, you're looking for high availability. So we offer 100% availability of power. Not 99.999, 100.
All the
we
time.
will literally sign an agreement at 100% availability. Yes. The second thing they're looking for is security. And we can talk a little bit more about the security on that side. And the third thing that they're looking for is that it's part of the internet, connectivity. Yes. So as we've moved into expanding this facility, we're addressing all of those. The really important thing about Samrand is as we acquired the site, it already had a power allocation. It's within the city of Tshwane,
yes. And
the city of Tshwane has a substation which has already allocated the power to that site. Yes. So as we stand today, that site has an availability of up to 40 to 50 megawatts of power from the grid already available, and that's the power we'll be using for the expansion. Okay. So if you're looking for criteria for choosing a data center, the first thing you would look for is power.
Okay.
Then obviously there are a number of other criteria that you look for in choosing a data center. So our ability to grow is based on the availability of power.
Yes.
But just to address your specific question, because what often sits behind that is people's perceptions of the power availability in South Africa. So first things first, we obviously have a much larger plan in terms of ensuring power availability. And that's got to do with the changes that have happened in the electricity industry in South Africa.
Yes.
So as you'll know, part of the problem that we have in South Africa is that it's not just that we have issues with availability of power, but the power that we do have is generally non-renewable. So 80 to 85% of the power on the national grid currently is generated from non-renewable sources.
Yes.
But we've had a massive opening up of that industry and the ability to start generating new electricity based on renewable sources. And the model for that is what we call wheeling.
Yes.
So we've actually signed an intermittent power producer agreement, so a power purchase agreement with somebody that is generating, and we're working with that independent power producer to generate our own electricity that we will consume on our own site.
Yes.
But it's because the site is physically not in a location where you can generate electricity.
Yes.
What we're actually doing is we're building that power plant, which is a solar PV power plant in the Free State.
Yes.
And we've entered into wheeling agreements, which will wheel that energy across the Eskom grid into the city of Tshwane and into our facility. So towards the end of this year, that's when that power will come on stream.
Yes.
And we're going to move from having, 10 to 15% renewable energy.
Yes.
We're going to add about another 30% of renewable energy into the mix. And over time, we have a plan to grow that even further. So the Samrand facility, as much as it has high availability of power, is also going to have a significant percentage of renewable energy growing into that facility.
Yes.
All of that is in place. And then the last thing, and which is perhaps something which is not more well known, but that particular facility is in an area which does not see load shedding because it's on a particular grid that is not load shed. So the combination of having high availability of power and the renewable energy means that we have a facility that is really, optimum for anybody that is looking for 100% availability of power. We can talk more about how we achieve 100% availability, even if there's a power outage. But that's the principle.
That's actually what I'd like to lead into. It's that even though you have grid power availability, you also have means to ensure that you have power when there is no grid power available. What have you done to ensure that?
So all data centers that are going to meet the standards required by any kind of global customer need to meet a minimum requirement to availability of power. So to achieve 100% availability of power, what you need to build is resiliency and redundancy of available power on the site. So what you do is you assume that if there's a mains failure, what do you have in terms of available power that can guarantee that you can continue to operate 100% of the time? And what you do effectively is provide on-site generation, and our on-site generation is typically diesel generators. That's the standard approach that's taken globally with backup power. Those diesel generators, however, are in a configuration that will guarantee that you can operate continuously. So we talk about tiering in data centers. And the current construction in the Samrand facility is what we call a Tier 4 environment. And Tier 4 means that effectively we have, if we need 3 generators, we've got 6. We effectively have what we call a 2N environment. So there's literally double the amount of available equipment on the site than you need to operate. Now what that means is that you're resilient to any failure. So you're completely resilient to any failure. You can lose any part of that equipment, one part of that equipment, and you'll be able to operate continuously. In general, if you look at Africa data centers across the continent, our minimum standard is what we call Tier 3. So many of our future builds will be built to Tier 3. And Tier 3 is what we call concurrent maintainability. So that's where, for example, if you need 3 generators, you have a 4th spare one rather than 6. And at Tier 3, you can still achieve the 100% availability. Because effectively you have 1 spare, you can always cycle through maintenance, etc. And that's exactly how we operate. So as much as we have 100% availability of power from the grid, we also effectively have 100% of availability of power on the site as well. So we can operate that site autonomously even if there were a complete shutdown of the grid.
But now having access to power is one thing. How you use that power also speak to how sustainable your data centers are. And what do you do to use power more efficiently?
So a lot of the focus within data centers over the last few years has been on one particular parameter. The parameter that we talk about is called power usage effectiveness. And that basically, if you think about what goes into a data center, you're going to have a whole lot of racks of equipment. So we house customers' equipment. We're not an IT company. We're the guys who do the building. And as I've said, we provide 100% availability of that building. But within the building itself, there are 2 things really that are consuming power. The one is the racks. And the second is all of the cooling and humidity systems that ensure that the environment is maintained. If you look at the way we calculate PUE, if you take the amount of power that goes into a rack and you look at the total amount of power going into the facility, that ratio. So for example, if you're using, say, 1 megawatt inside the IT equipment and you're using, say, a third of that, say 300 kilowatts within the aircon, that would be a PUE of 1.3. So what we do within our facilities is we look to optimize that parameter. And we do that by focusing on the cooling systems. And so there are a number of things we do within the environments to ensure we optimize cooling. We do what we call containment. If you cool down the whole room, that's like a fridge, for example. You cool down the whole room, you're going to have to cool all the air in the room. If you put a container or a box around the aisle within which you're operating the equipment, you can contain that air and then you can improve that efficiency. We do exactly that. So we do what we call cold aisle containment in the current Samrand facility, where we pipe the air into the racks. So that's sort of step one. That's the basics of running data centers. That's been the experience over the last few years. And we optimized by doing that with our new builds. So when we look at the Samrand facility as it currently stands, the existing facility is built in such a way that we can do cold aisle containment, and we optimize by doing by ensuring that we do that within the data halls. As we expand the facility, we're getting much smarter. So the technology's moved on. Technology's moved on significantly over the years since the original facility was built.
Yes.
And so as we build out the new shell on the Samrand facility, and I can explain what we're doing there,
Yeah.
but effectively as we build out the new expansion on the Samrand facility, we're adding a whole lot of new technologies. The first thing we're doing is that we're starting to use what we call free cooling.
Yes.
So in other words, the chiller systems, if you think about it, I mean, we're sitting here on a winter's day. If you go outside right now, it's not that warm. As soon as the temperature is below about 17 degrees, we don't have to run a refrigerator. We can just use the cold air. So we can use the cold air outside to cool the chiller systems, and then we've got a closed loop system to pipe the cooling into the environment. But effectively, we don't have to be running the refrigerator.
Yes.
And so about 180 days a year, we can get some kind of free cooling. So at night in winter, it's great, turn the fridge off and open the door, as it were. It's not quite so simple, but that's effectively what we're doing, is to keep stuff cold in the fridge at night. If you just put it outside and open the door, it'd be fine.
Yes.
And that's effectively what we're doing, except it's a little more technical than that.
Yes.
So about half the year, we get some free cooling. So
Yes.
we get some percentage of free cooling. So that's one of the first things we do. Now, if you think about it, free cooling is costing you nothing. Therefore, it's not taking any kilowatts or any kilowatt hours of energy. So the result is that reduces the PUE.
Okay.
The second thing we do is we do a lot of smarter things in terms of the actual cooling environment. So obviously we do this containment, we put a lot more control. And there are two really smart things we're doing right now. So one of them has to do with the mechanical engineering, and the other has to do with AI. So on the mechanical engineering side, when we start to talk hyperscale, so I mentioned that this is a hyperscale facility, the expansion we're building. When we talk about hyperscale, it's a general term people use in the data center industry. We think of it in terms of your global providers, the guys building those massive data centers and putting the AI stuff in it.
Yes.
But hyperscale for us is really sort of anything from about 2 megawatts up.
Okay.
So again, just for the benefit of people who are not used to calculating in data centers, we used to measure data centers in square meters and in racks, etc. Nowadays, we tend to count megawatts. Okay. So 1 kettle is 1 kilowatt, 1,000 kettles is a megawatt. If you look at the expansion we're doing on Samrand, that's 20 megawatts. So think 20,000 kettles. It's a suburb.
Yes.
It's effectively a suburb. But the important thing is that when you start building a hyperscale hall, and you put lots and lots of high-powered racks into a hall, and that's typically what your cloud providers do. It's increasingly what your financial services guys are doing. How are you going to make sure that that's optimum? Well, one of the easy ways to do it is to build the whole system around a higher density of cooling. And we do that with a fairly radical change in the design. So typical data center, you would have raised flooring, and you pipe the air through the floor and it goes through the racks. I mean, I think people who are in the industry are used to what this looks like. You're used to that computer room look.
Yes.
It's got a raised floor and it's got air coming in the side, etc. We get rid of that. And we take out the raised floor, we drop everything down onto the concrete. And we build the whole hall as a fridge with what we call fan walls on the side. We pump cold air into the fridge, and then inside we do what we call hot aisle containment. So the air goes through the racks and flows out through the hot aisles.
Okay.
And there we get another step improvement. So that's called a fan wall design. So some of the new halls, not the existing ones, some of the new halls we're building in this massive new 20 megawatt build that we're doing at Samrand, some of those halls are going to be fan wall based halls, which get that next level of efficiency.
Yes.
And people have in their mind this idea of what these big global data centers look like with their thousands of racks.
Yes.
That's how
That's
they're built.
exactly it.
That's how they're built.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're moving to. So that's the mechanical change.
Yes.
On the electrical side, or if you like the control side, we are deploying what we call a data center infrastructure management system, so a DSIM. And it's a platform that lets us actually monitor the entire environment, right down to the exact airflows through every aircon unit, temperatures in, temperatures out, humidities. We literally have a digital twin of the environment. So with this digital twin of the environment, we then look at the whole environment and we run it through an AI model. And what the AI model tells us is how to optimize it. Move that tile, move this airflow, adjust this temperature. So what we can do is then incrementally improve the performance. So even though you've got a already built out facility and somebody's worked out that if I put the aisles here and I put this here, etc., that works about right.
Yes.
Now you can do an actual live monitoring of exactly what's happening in that facility. So that's what we're doing now, is adding a data center infrastructure management system. So we've deployed that within Samrand, and we're busy using that to optimize in the existing environment. So literally you run the AI model and it says, close that, switch that, change that.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Very, very smart. I think you touched on this, but you mentioned that you have shells that you're building now. So you're expanding the data center in different ways. What is shell ready?
Okay, so just to give you a sense of the kind of market we're in. So I spoke about the old market. So the kind of data center that Samrand used to be when it was a private data center run by for a single entity. In that environment, a company would typically invest in a purpose-built facility that matched exactly their requirements. In the larger market globally, what we're seeing now is that the data center demand is dominated by really a couple of different industries. The obvious one is the cloud providers. So again, we've talked about AI, we've talked about the fact that if you look at what's actually being deployed around the world, it's actually the deployments from the global cloud providers. We're very careful not to mention our customers by name, but if you can think of the largest companies in the world, the ones on the west coast of the United States and a few similar ones,
yes,
those are the guys driving the demand. And their demand is to roll out data centers that get further and further into the world and extend closer to customers. So we talk about edge data centers getting closer to all the customers. The consequence of that is we've got enormous growth. And so instead of building data centers of 1 megawatt at a time, we need to be able to roll out data centers that grow in phases of 10 megawatts at a time. Okay. So 5 to 10 megawatts at a time. So we have a model which is a well-developed model globally called the sort of core and shell, where you build the shell. So the initial investment from us as the data center provider is really creating the concrete shell with an environment that will enable you to build a highly secure physical building. And then we can either tailor the fit out of that to the exact requirements of, for example, one of the global cloud providers. So we talk about that we've got a product name, we call it Superscale. So in our environment, we would talk to the global cloud providers, say exactly what you want. Exactly what electrical configuration do you want, what mechanical configuration do you want, how many racks do you want in the halls, what layout do you want, which kind of containment, etc., etc. And we could effectively build to suit within the shell.
Okay.
For a number of customers, and this is perhaps more common in things like your financial services industry.
Yes.
Samrand, by the way, is the biggest financial services outsource hub on the continent. I mean, second to none. Simply because it houses a number of major banks and financial services players
Yes.
who are also moving towards outsource. But a typical bank, for example, wouldn't necessarily want to go and specify all of this technical detail.
Yes.
So we would build something which is essentially take the shell and say, okay, we'll build our standard build. So we'll build out, for example, we spoke about the tier 3 designs, whatever
Yes.
it might be. We would build out our design to their specifications and match it. And we can be flexible on that. That's what we call our flex scale product.
Okay.
And those sort of environments would be where a customer comes to us, maybe a financial services customer, and says, okay, I don't want to run my own data center anymore. By the way, that's not an uncommon thing in the market today. I think a lot of companies have realized that the specialist skills and capability, particularly with all these standards in place,
Yes.
of having to run a data center in an environment where you want flexibility, you want to move some of your workloads to cloud, you want to be able to have scalability in your operations. And so that's our product we call FlexScale. It essentially is building out an environment for a single customer. We can build a cage around it, we can put it in a single hall. And then obviously your sort of tail end of customers is your regular colocation customers. I think that's what people are more familiar with when you talk about something like your when people think of a colocation data center, they think of the fact that you're putting 1s and 2s and 10s of racks into them from individual customers.
Yes.
And that's what we call our ReadyScale product. And ReadyScale basically is what you would imagine a data center to look like. So it's already fitted out. You can walk into it, racks are there. We can
Yes.
provide racks, and you can literally move in and switch on. So we've got different. So the idea of the core and shell is really to target the high end of the market, to really be more like a wholesale provider to the very largest customers.
Yes.
All the way down to being a sort of very retail focused one rack provider,
yes.
all the way through. So core and shell gives us that flexibility, and importantly, I think for ADC as a business, it's also a question of how we phase the build. So we're meeting both the customer's requirement in terms of, you know, when they want what and how they want it,
yes.
at the same time as being, you know, the model is smart from our perspective, because
yes.
it enables us to scale appropriately to do as the market requires demand.
Yes. So you did mention that a lot of customers are moving away from managing their own infrastructure to you. You have economies of scale and economies of expertise, right?
Yes.
And that's to meet standards. Can you tell us about the various different standards that you meet for your customers?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just a couple of comments there. We engage with a lot of CIOs in the wider enterprise and government space at the moment. And in South Africa, the question has always been, the decision on total cost of ownership between outsource and insource.
Yes.
But there's some real nuances to that nowadays. So my favorite question to CIOs nowadays is, are you sure you can get a diesel technician when you have a problem with your generator during load shedding? Most of them realize that that sort of highlights this point about this has become a specialized environment, because we're not talking about maintaining an environment which, you know, might sometimes have some power failures, and therefore you might have to have something on standby. We're talking about being able to operate through, from everything from no load shedding right the way through to extreme levels of load shedding. But at the same time, there's pressure on the whole economy. Everybody has this problem.
Yes.
So that's what drives the logic of using a specialist provider. So just to give you a sense of the standards. So we need to first meet this availability requirement. So we spoke about having tier 3 or tier 4 data centers. I mean, that's like a ticket to the game. No one would be providing a data center that for outsource that doesn't provide at least those kinds of availabilities. But layered on top of that are a number of ISO standards. So if you look at, and if you talk to any one of the major enterprises we'll deal with, and financial services in particular, and are very, very strict in terms of their standards. So you start with things like the basic ISO 9001 quality certification, which we have for all our data centers. Yes. You need to add to that your ISO 27001 for cybersecurity, for information security. Now, we don't do the cybersecurity for a customer. As I said, we're not an IT provider.
Yes.
But just the ID card coming in, that data has to be secured at a level that is at ISO 27001. And we've just been busy being certified on the ISO 27001 2022 edition. So the guys out there who do this will recognize that as being, the latest levels of cybersecurity. But there's also environmental certifications. So every customer we deal with, every major customer nowadays has got a broader ESG requirement. So they require us to be both environmentally and health and safety certified. So those also are ISO standards. So that's your ISO 14001, ISO 45001. And then you get to the specialist standards. So one of the specialist standards that we adopt, and that's what we have, for example, for Samrand, but in fact we have it across all of our facilities, is what we call the PCI DSS standard. Now, I mean, I've spoken about the three things that a customer is looking for. Customers are looking for 1, high availability; 2, they're looking for connectivity; but 3, they're looking for security. And we talk about security, often when people talk about data center security, they're thinking cybersecurity. But that's not where we focus our security as a provider of the facility.
Yes.
Our security is focused on physical security. So you'll notice that if you come into a facility like Samrand, the first thing you'll see is that you can't get in without actually being identified with a reference number and producing a suitable photographic government ID to prove who you are.
Yes.
Secondly, you're going to be on camera continuously. So we have a camera environment that covers every corner of the data center.
Yes.
All of that access control, those camera systems, all of that goes into archived information. So we can correlate all of this. So take a simple example, we know who's come into the facility and we can watch them on camera and see exactly what they do. All of that is archived and it's stored for a required period. And that is then audited under the PCI DSS standard. Now, PCI stands for Payment Card Industry. So payment card industry has this standard. So anywhere that a credit card transaction happens in the world, including in Samrand, any one of those institutions that has to run those kinds of transactions has to meet the standard, or they won't get a banking license. They won't be allowed to operate with the global card providers, for example.
Yes.
So that standard is the key. And then most recently what we've got is a SOC 2 standard. That's more of an audit standard. So we have a SOC 2 Type 2, which is a standard that essentially demonstrates to customers that everything that we say we do in terms of our processes, our procedures, our security, all of that has been independently audited by an audit firm. So it's not a technical standard in a sense. It's an audit, a full audit of the processes, procedures of the organization, and it's over a period. So that's a SOC 2 Type 2 standard. And so, there are a number of other standards we're doing. We're working on ISO 50001, which is the energy management standard.
Yes.
We work with ISO 22301, which is the standard for business continuity. So that's like your disaster recovery business continuity standard.
Yes.
So certainly for these very largest customers, those are basically the things they look for. So you'd buy from us because we're a data center provider. We would get a ticket to the game for being a tier 3 or tier 4 data center and having an high available data center with security and with connectivity. But those guys that we're talking about would not buy from a provider that can't produce all of these certifications. So that's really what differentiates us. And I think from a South Africa perspective, if you look at South Africa on the global stage, we've seen multiple countries on the African continent starting to position themselves to being providers on the global stage in data centers. I mean, one of the ironies is that Africa has 15% of the world's population and 1% of the world's data centers. So we have a huge potential for growth. And as we see this AI growth happening around the world, we're going to see that edge of the AI starting to expand into the African continent. And so to be part of that world, we need to meet these standards. So that's what ADC is all about. ADC is all about being a competitor with global players.
Yes.
We don't benchmark ourselves against, a regular enterprise data center. We're benchmarking ourselves against the best of the best in global hyperscale data centers, which is heavy lifting. It means we have to do a lot more. I mean, we literally have to do a lot more than sort of a regular data center that's being operated within an enterprise. But it does mean that customers that come to us are going to get all of that.
Yes.
So again, whether you're the 1 rack customer or the 1,000 rack customer, you're going to get access to a data center that's got all of that certification.
Talking about the heavy lifting that you're doing, I've heard rumors that Samrand facility is also bomb-proof and it can also survive an airplane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The Samrand facility is a hugely impressive facility. I mean, as I say, we acquired the facility originally, but it was built to very, very high standards, very much focused on the financial services industry. And so as much as we talk about all these ISO standards, it's also built like Fort Knox. I mean, it really is. Getting in and out of there, we have meter-thick walls on the existing facility. It's got bomb-proof doors, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
It's certainly a facility that, if it gives that additional level of comfort. So we're going to produce a certificate to say we meet all these standards, but I think there's certainly in the financial services industry, and I think with people's understanding of the importance of privacy of information and safety of information, it gives that extra level of comfort that this is a super secure facility.
Okay. And now building such a large facility obviously takes a lot of investment, but a lot of expertise as well. Could you tell us who you've collaborated with in building this facility?
So I mean, we've got a very wide range of suppliers. I'm not going to go through the individual suppliers, but just to give you a sense of how we work. So we work typically, there are a number of major suppliers. One of the things, again, because we're not an IT company, our primary suppliers are actually in the building industry and in the equipment industry, electrical, mechanical. So as I said, I don't want to pull out the individual suppliers because we effectively work with the whole range of suppliers. But we've worked with all the major construction companies in the country. So Samrand certainly has been built by one of the leading construction companies. The thing I can say is that Samrand has also achieved certification as one of the safest sites for construction in the country. So that's, because we're operating within all these very tight frameworks and standards. So yes, we've worked with multiple construction companies. And then if you look at the equipment that we buy, we're buying world-class leading-edge generators, transformers, cooling systems. And so I don't want to pull out the individual suppliers because we work with all of them.
Yes.
But that's been our sort of the base of how we develop these facilities.
Yes.
In parallel, we work with providers in terms of the maintenance and the operation of these facilities. So we have a number of outsourced providers that we use, for example, specialists in the areas of the facilities management, maintenance, operation. I mentioned earlier, how do you get a diesel technician? The simple answer is that you work with a provider that gives you a service level agreement that guarantees an available diesel technician on their payroll who can be on your site when you need him.
Yes.
Or her. So that's the kind of provider that we work with. So there are a number of providers, and then also on the security side, obviously, South Africa is very good on physical security. We have a number of specialist security companies, so we work with those as well. One of the things that when we're dealing with international customers, if I just focus for a second, I spoke about connectivity, I spoke about the availability. When you're dealing with global customers, coming onto the African continent, security becomes a bigger question for them. And what we're able to do, and this is not just Samrand, this applies to, we've got facilities in Nigeria, we've got facilities in Kenya, and facilities across South Africa. So we've got 3 major data centers in South Africa. We're able to provide that level of comfort that we are not just specialists in like the standards, but we're actually specialists in operating securely in a South African environment. Really just being integrated into the local security environment, knowing what's happening in the wider society, ensuring that we can lock down facilities if we need to, ensuring that we've got the right intelligence. We have everything, because we're working with local security providers as well. We have everything from your basic monitoring to armed response to air support, anything that you want on call.
Yes.
To give a global customer comfort that even though they're not familiar with, say, the South African market or any one of our other African markets, that we're the specialists. And I think also, if you talk financial services, if you step back and look at it, that specialization is something which gives a financial services customer comfort that we actually can do this better than insourcing.
Okay.
And that's the key. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Dr. Angus Hay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. This was another episode of TCS Plus, brought to you by Africa Data Centers.